All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Friday night presentation by Stephanie. She will be presenting her journey throughout her high school on Science Olympiad and other social impact projects she did as well. So let me first spend 2 minutes to introduce myself. My name is Ted Kai, and I am the co-founder of Momentum Learning. We help students to learn STEM-related subjects to excel in those competitions, academic competitions. But at the same time, I think it's important that we help students to realize social impact and leadership are also important. That's something Stephanie will be talking about today as well. So let's do a quick intro of Stephanie. Stephanie just graduated from Seven Lakes High School in Katy, which is a suburb in Houston here. And she will be attending Harvard College in the fall. Throughout high school, she had many accomplishments. The most distinguished ones would be she is an RSI scholar. If you are not familiar with the high school STEM camps, RSI is probably regarded as the most prestigious research camp for some high schooler. That's for usually for juniors. In addition to RSI, prior to that, she also attended the HSMC, where she did some of the math research projects as well. She participated in a few different academic competitions throughout high school. For example, she's a 3-time qualifier of the biology Olympiad. She's the 4-time qualifier of the AMY contest. And in addition, she's very focused on the Science Olympiad. She will be talking about how to prepare for that today. One more thing I want to mention is throughout her high school years, she not only focused on the academics, but also she focused on the leadership side of things. For example, she wrote a book about public health, about epidemiology, where she promotes social awareness of public health among high school students. So that's something she will be discussing as well. So I think it's very important for high school. The students should not just be focused on the school academics. I mean, of course, you have to do really well in school and the related subjects, but also you need to look a little bit broader to have emphasized on the leadership skills, to have emphasized on the things you can do to help people around you. I think that's very important. When you're an adult, you use your talent and your skill set to help the people in a society, especially for people who are less fortunate. Before I hand this over to Stephanie, let me talk about the procedure today. Stephanie will be going through her presentation for about 35 to 40 minutes. And after that, she will take questions. Between now and then, please hold your questions. If you have questions, you can actually type it up on the chat room. So when she's done with her presentation, she will take a look at the chat room and go through the questions you guys might have. And she will try to address as many questions as she can. Please stay muted throughout the whole presentation. Previously, when we were on the presentations, there's occasionally somebody would accidentally unmute and then we hear a lot of background noises, which is unnecessary. So make sure you're muted for the whole time. And with that said, let me just turn this over to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ted, for the introduction and for inviting me to talk here. My name is Stephanie, and today I'm going to be discussing a few topics, mostly Science Olympiad and social impact. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen. All right, so just a little bit about me. This was already mentioned, but I will be going to Harvard in the fall to study molecular biology and government on a potential pre-med track. As for Science Olympiad, I've been competing in that competition for 6 years. And some of the more social impact projects that I've worked on include Project Unmasked, which is a public health education campaign, as well as Epidemiology Unmasked, which was a book that I wrote to help promote public health and epidemiology education, as well as a nonprofit that I started with some friends on promoting access to quality education online. So these are just some of my accomplishments in high school. So if you have any questions related to any of these, feel free to let me know in the chat, and I'll try to answer them as much as I can near the end of the presentation. Okay, so now let's move on to the first part of my discussion, which was Science Olympiad. And I do want to clarify that the Science Olympiad that I'm going to be talking about is the actual competition called Science Olympiad, and not necessarily the USA Biology Olympiad, USA Math Olympiad, stuff like that. So this is like a separate competition. Okay, so I know many of you guys may have Science Olympiad clubs in your school, and I did as well. So I was very fortunate to be able to participate in that since 7th grade. So these are just some of my tips to help you prepare for the competition and do as well as you can. So I have 3 main tips for doing well in Science Olympiad, and I think most of them somehow revolve around one of these 3. And so the first one that I would recommend would be to read books. And textbooks are definitely the best way to gain as much knowledge as possible, especially in more biology-focused events. You definitely need to read a lot of textbooks, or maybe not a lot, but definitely need to spend time reading the material. And I think textbooks are the best way to get that material. Online is also a good way to learn the material, but I think textbooks are great places to have concentrated, organized material to learn the curriculum from. And then another thing is to talk to fellow scientists. And I don't necessarily mean someone who is an expert in the field, although that would help. Talking to friends, other people on your team, having good discussions about different topics that you're learning about is a great way to collaborate and learn about different topics that help you do well in the contest. And Science Olympiad is a very collaborative competition. If you may not know, all the contests are held in partnerships. So you need to maintain a good relationship with your partner. And I highly suggest working together on study sets, practice tests, and just maintaining good communication to discuss the material. And then finally, I would encourage you to attend as many competitions as possible. And Science Olympiad is unique in that there are several invitationals, multiple, every single semester, and they are to help you prepare for the regional and state and national level competitions. And I would, especially if you're new to the competition, I would encourage you to compete in as many as possible. This way you gain experience and you're not as nervous the more when it comes to the more important competitions later down the line. And then through competing, you also gain a lot of experience that you otherwise would not have, such as good test taking skills and what you need to figure out how to learn more about. Okay, and then this is just some more tips on how to prepare. So the first step usually is to find resources from which you can learn the material. As I alluded to earlier, reading textbooks is a really good way to start. And if textbooks seem a little bit daunting to you, I totally understand. A way to help overcome that is to watch some online videos where someone explains stuff step by step. And Khan Academy is usually a good place to start, especially for biology related events where some of the processes might be a little bit challenging to understand. And then outside of textbooks and online videos, I also recommend going online onto those informative websites like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is very detailed, so that's also a good place to use, good resource to use for your notes and for general learning. And then many of the Science Olympiad events that you may participate in, especially the study events, allow you to bring in a sheet of notes or multiple sheets of notes into the competition, but they limit you on how many pages of notes you can bring. So what you want to do is, as you're studying, you want to work on creating these notes just so they help you reinforce your knowledge of the content, and so that you better remember what you're learning about. And as you note take, you're actually reinforcing your memory. And so this way, creating notes also helps you memorize the material or remember it better. And this way you don't actually, it's easier for you to refer to those notes during the competition, as well as remember the material during the competition. And then also taking practice tests is super important. These really help you get into the style of the competition. I know a lot of the times asking your captains of your school team can allow you to gain access to some practice tests. Asking around with friends and other people who participate in these contests can also give you access to practice tests, as well as finding just publicly available sets online. And I would highly recommend taking these tests under time circumstances. So what I mean by this is making sure you give yourself the actual allotted amount of time in the real contest, as well as not doing any shortcuts when you're looking for answers in your notes. So preparing under time circumstances, taking practice tests alone or with your partner, those are basically super important for you to get better at the events that you're doing, especially if you're focused on study events. And then these are just some of the books that that I would recommend you to read, depending on what scientific topic that you're focused on in Science Olympiad. This is by no means a very comprehensive set of textbooks, but I know a lot of my friends have recommended these textbooks as well as just from my own experience. So in biology, I think introductory textbooks are usually those that you may find in your high school's biology class. Maybe they may be readings that are recommended by your teachers, etc. So those are just a good way for you to test the waters to see if this subject is one that you really want to invest in. And then once you are able to really get involved in biology, the best book that is arguably out there for biology learners is Campbell's Biology, especially for contest prep. It's probably the most comprehensive biology textbook out there, and the learning curve is not too bad. So you don't need to be an expert in order to understand Campbell's Biology. And as long as you read Campbell's multiple times, maybe not multiple times, at least once, you should be able to have a good grasp of at least the basic concepts that they'll test you on. And Campbell's Biology is also good practice for the USA Biology Olympiad, or USABO, for those of you guys who are also interested in that. And then as you get more advanced, maybe you want to delve deeper into a specific event, such as protein modeling, which is specifically focused on like biochemistry and molecular biology. You may want to invest in some specialty books, so books that go specific into one topic. So Albert's Molecular Biology is a really popular one among molecular biology enthusiasts. There's also Raven's Plant Biology. I know there's also a genetics textbook called Booker's Genetics. So just a good way to find those is to just Google whatever topic that you wanted to learn more about, and then add textbook at the end of your Google search. It should come up a list of really good textbooks for you to use. And then as for chemistry, these are just some of the good chemistry textbooks that my friends have recommended. Modern Chemistry is a really good and gentle introduction to chemistry. And then we have some intermediate and specialty books. And so these are just some recommendations that I may have. And physics are also listed there. And but note that all of the advanced textbooks that I wrote, it's totally fine if you don't understand it right off the bat. This is definitely for people who have already had some sort of background knowledge on the topic and really want to learn really deep material. So this is just a good reference to have when you're preparing your resources for Science Olympiad. And then a really, really important part of Science Olympiad, especially for the study events, is good note-taking skills. So Science Olympiad is very special in that they allow students to actually take in notes to the competition for many of the study events. And sometimes having good notes will really make or break your chances of doing well. And because you're only limited to a number of pages of notes, you really want to make sure that your notes are concise and that you know how to format your notes. And so these are just some of my best tips for how to format Scioli notes. And my first tip is to paraphrase. And you don't want to just copy paste from a website or Wikipedia or something and then have a bunch of jargon left in the notes. That's not really going to help you, because during the day of the competition, you're not going to be able to read through everything and copy everything down. That's just not very feasible. So I would recommend paraphrasing anything and everything in your notes. If you're scrambling last minute and you need to finish your notes, but you're not done, and if you have to copy paste, make sure you read through it very thoroughly first and delete any possible jargon that you may see, just to make your life easier on the day of the competition. And then a highlighting system is really helpful to implement as well. And what I mean by this is in your notes, you want to include like different colors for different hierarchies of material. So for example, the one that I use is for all headings, like big topics, I use blue, and then green for subheadings, and then yellow for definitions. And then I have some other colors for ones that are below that. So just having a good system of highlighting so that you stay organized in your notes and it's easy for you to find what you are looking for on the day of the contest, because you don't really have that much time to be flipping through your notes on the day of the contest. And then just another tip that I have is to use Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word is definitely much more flexible in formatting notes than things like Google Docs or other text edit software. And a good way to share these Microsoft Word documents is to use OneDrive. You can set up a sharing method by having both partners create an email, and then you can edit simultaneously, and then that will just allow you to save all your work as well. And then also, these are just some technical tips for saving space on your notes, since I know some of you guys may be pressed for space. And I would recommend a good way to organize your notes is to use text boxes. And you should be able to find that pretty easily in the Word settings. And then reducing your margin size, turning on single spacing, and making sure that your images are very clear. And I would recommend putting images into your notes because sometimes, or almost all of the time, they'll have diagrams in there for you to fill out. And if you have a diagram that matches whatever you're trying to do, then that's going to make your life a lot easier. And then, so yeah, let's move on to the levels of competition for Science Olympiad for those of you guys who may not be familiar. So the first level of competition is an invitational contest. So these are contests that are just for practice for most of the year. And there are some very, very prestigious invitationals out there though, and they are very good practice for state and national level contests. Probably the most famous Science Olympiad, or the most famous slash competitive Science Olympiad invitational competition is going to be the MIT Invitational. And if your school has the resources and the means to do so, I would highly recommend you guys attend that one, or any other notable invitational that would give you a insight to the level of competition that will be there at nationals. So attending these invitationals is very important. And if you can't make it to these like super high competition invitationals, attending as many local level invitationals as possible is also good practice. I know in Houston, there's the annual Sci Falls competition, as well as the UT Austin hosts a competition. So these are all good invitationals with good quality tests to attend. Especially if you're starting out, it may seem scary to attend these contests or attend so many, but I promise they're very good practice and they really help you learn a lot about what you need to improve and how you can improve. And then the next level of competition is the regional competition. These occur in different parts of the state. And then those who perform well in regional competitions will be allowed to compete at the state level competition. And in Texas, we're allowed to take one, I believe the last time I checked, it was one team from Texas is allowed to go to nationals in the high school division. So if you are able to make the school's team, you're able to participate in the state competition. And then if your school gets first in the state, then you're allowed to compete in the national level competition. And then for national level competition, it's definitely a huge rise in the level of competitiveness from the state level competition. And it's usually held in some university. It alternates year to year, but it's a really fun experience. You get to meet teams from across the country. There are different events that are hosted. And I believe starting from next year's like 2023, it should be in person. So that would be a really fun experience as well. So that sort of wraps up my first section of the presentation on Science Olympiad, and I will be answering any other questions on Science Olympiad later on. But now I wanted to move on to the second part of my presentation on social impact. So let's move on. So first, just to give you guys a brief introduction to what I mean by social impact, I really believe that high school or just life in general, it's really important to look out for problems that you may see in society or injustices that you may see in society and find unique ways to tackle those. And it's a really rewarding experience for you to participate in these more innovative, more less competition based, but more innovative activities that can really help improve your leadership skills, your confidence, as well as the impact that you have on your community. And so, yeah, I'll just give you a brief introduction on how I got involved and what I've done so far. So the first part, when I started in my sophomore year, when COVID hit, I decided that I wanted to really do something to help reduce the misinformation that was being spread and to really provide a resource that teaches epidemiology in a simple way. So that's how I started writing my textbook called Epidemiology Unmasked. And I had three main goals in mind, which was to disseminate knowledge, disrupt misinformation, and to promote personal health responsibility. And I felt like writing a book was a good way to do so because I had a solid level of background knowledge on the topic just from competing in Science Olympiad. So I felt like I would be able to offer a good perspective and provide good insight through a textbook. And so currently, currently been it's definitely reached really far, more farther than I could have ever imagined. So I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, let's move on to the next part, which was when I launched my project called Project Unmasked. And Project Unmasked is basically sort of the extension of Epidemiology Unmasked, where I wanted to promote public health literacy in different lenses than just writing a book. And Project Unmasked really takes on several ways. One is to implement curricula in different schools related to public health, as well as advocating for legislative changes for students to better learn public health. Um, so yeah, I was able to combine my mission of public health literacy, well, the two projects that I did through public health literacy, and launch Project Unmasked. So now I just wanted to give a brief sort of summary on what advocacy can entail for you if you're interested in getting involved in a community service project like this. And so my project is dedicated to public health education advocacy, but I've met many other different people, especially high school students, who have been working on different projects that are really inspiring. And these are just some of the common themes that I've noticed. So one major theme that I've noticed is providing support and resources to underprivileged or under-resourced areas. This is definitely a very admirable thing to do. And then also creating educational programs, since education of any sort can definitely always be improved. And then fundraising for some positive social cause, engaging and mobilizing others to make a difference, and creating something new to address an existing inadequacy. So for number 5, a lot of this, sometimes this can entail some sort of research project even, where you come up with a new device or a new app or something unique to address an existing inadequacy. But overall, the theme is to change the status quo for the better. And that usually involves creative thinking and working very holistically to address the problem. Okay, and so these are just some of the tips that I have for if you would like to do some sort of advocacy or social impact project. Probably my best piece of advice is to start local. Everyone has to start somewhere, and it doesn't need to be super ambitious where you start. And so the place that you have the most influence as a student is in your local community. And so maybe reaching out to your school, reaching out to your parents, teachers, friends, people who you know personally, they have the highest chance to really want to help you out with your project. And starting local usually leads you to many other opportunities to expand your project and expand your reach. So the way I did this was with Project Unmasked. I started off very local. It started off in my school. And so I implemented a curriculum in my school. And since Seven Lakes is already a pretty big school, that gave me a pretty solid opportunity to branch out to other schools and then really get my message out there. So starting local really opens a lot of doors for you. And just when you're starting, you don't want to be overly ambitious with what you're doing. And reach out to those you know about a cause that you're passionate about. You really want to explain why it is that you're working on such a project and your goals, how they can help you. You want to be very clear and articulate in your messaging. And then my next tip is to not underestimate the power of media recognition. Maybe getting some sort of recognition in your local newspaper. It doesn't need to be like a huge newspaper or anything. It could just be like a very like one in your suburb, one in your city. That is usually something that will launch your project to the next level. This will usually allow you to get more eyes on your project, and people are often more willing to reach out to you than you think they are. So once you get media recognition, oftentimes that will lead to many more opportunities to expand your project. And people will want to invest in your project more if you're able to convey a very strong messaging for what you're doing. And the way you get media recognition is can be difficult. Oftentimes it requires reaching out yourself, or if you know of anyone who is willing to cover your story, networking with people, just talking to people who you think could somehow connect you with someone. It's a lot of networking and just grunt work, to be honest. So definitely stay patient throughout this process. And then the next thing I would say is to reach out to people who have the power to make a change. Oftentimes, as a student, it may be difficult to directly influence something since students are we're still like pretty young, we don't have the level of influence that some other people may have. And so reaching out to people who can actually make a change or help you make a change is a good way to make that initial influence. So people like leaders, teachers, community leaders, adults who have some sort of leadership position in different organizations or in different parts of your town or your city. Those are good people to reach out to, as well as any like potential mentors, professors, just people who you know would be able to make a change if you're able to convey your message very well. So, and also it can be kind of scary sometimes to reach out to people who have this sort of power, but people are definitely more likely to help you, more interested in helping you than you may think they are. Because if you're a young student or young person who's actively going out to make a change, that in and of itself is very inspiring. So you should take advantage of that. And then finally, I also wanted to just touch base a little bit about time management, which is a very, very important topic, especially for high school students who are high achieving. This can sometimes be like an underrated topic. So I wanted to spend some time on this just to touch base on some of the strategies that I've used. So I've split these up into big picture strategies and more like small picture strategies. So big picture strategies are more like mindset changes that you really want to make to manage your time well. And one thing that I would say is to have a vision and stick to it. And what I mean by that is you want to create like goals for yourself that are ambitious, and you want to have some internal passion for what you're doing, so that you always stay motivated to do what you do. And if you're working on something that you're genuinely passionate about, and this vision is very clear to you, then oftentimes you don't even notice it and you want to do it. So that would help you a lot in productivity. And then to find enjoyment in productive activities. So if you're doing work and you hate it, that's not going to be helpful for you. So you want to figure out some way to make your work seem more enjoyable. And then also to learn how to prioritize certain activities over others. Especially in high school, we're often overwhelmed with so many different options to do, so many clubs, so many organizations to join, different things that we feel like we have to do. And you really want to know which ones are your priority and which ones are sort of less important to you. And having this clear totem pole of priorities can help you manage your time a lot better than if you didn't have such a totem pole. You can end up stretching yourself out way too thin if you don't learn how to prioritize certain activities over others. And also know when to drop an activity. That sort of follows from 3. If you really feel like you are stretched too thin, you don't have enough time for yourself, then you do need to learn that you cannot have everything, and that if you really feel like you need to cut some slack for yourself, then know when it is that you need to drop an activity. Or if you're just not that interested in activity anymore, that's totally fine and it's totally normal. So high school is usually a good place for you to discover who you are and what your passions are. So if you realize that something really isn't for you anymore, then it's totally okay to drop it. It's really in the long run, it'll probably help you more than hurt you if it's really just not clicking with you. And then staying consistent in your efforts and daily routine. You don't want to be sort of having a random approach towards your life. You want to have a more consistent approach on what you're doing daily, what your long-term goals are. You want to stay focused and stay just understanding that you can't try everything. You can't do everything. And you want to stay consistent in what it is that you want to do. But that doesn't mean you can't change. You can definitely explore different things and change up your path. That's totally fine. But just as long as you don't overwhelm yourself with that. And then to set ambitious yet reasonable goals every time you begin an activity. And the way you definitely don't want to set a goal that is super easily achievable, because then that really wouldn't be a goal. It wouldn't challenge yourself. So you want to make sure that your goals really push you to work harder and push you out of your comfort zone, and that's how you grow. But you don't want to make it too unreasonable to the point where you stress yourself out too much. And then this one is super important. to know how and when to ask for help. Because as one person, you definitely can't do everything on your own. You definitely will need support from parents, teachers, friends, etc. And just knowing that it's okay to ask for help is a good way to make sure that you're maximizing your high school experience. Okay, so that was those are some of the big picture strategies, mindset, more philosophical strategies to stick with for time management. Now I just wanted to move on to some of the more detailed strategies that you can implement starting like tomorrow in your daily routine. So one would be to prevent distractions from social media, text, etc. when you're working. This one I think is underrated, to be honest. I think a lot of the times we think that we're good multitaskers, but you'll definitely be more productive if you're focused on the thing that you're doing. And if you feel like you need to, website blockers and time limits are also an option. And then having an organized, accessible calendar so that you stay organized in all the events that you have to go to, all the work that you need to get done. Just this way, especially if you're new to high school, you'll definitely have a lot of deadlines throughout high school, and keeping up with those deadlines is very important. And then one thing that I do at least is writing out my daily and weekly to-do tasks and goals. This way I just stay organized, and I try my best not to slack off if I can see all the things that I still need to get done. And then sticking to a relatively consistent daily routine. So I would recommend having some sort of routine to fall on every day you come home from school or during the summer. This way you are in a familiar environment, and you're not changing it up too much on yourself. And then also give yourself productive breaks when working. And what I mean by productive breaks is breaks where you're doing something that is fun for you, but also can help you grow, help you be a better person as well. So maybe that could be like a productive hobby that you enjoy doing. So like reading, or some sort of sport that you're interested in doing. So usually I think productive breaks are better than simply doing something that you feel like doesn't really help you at all. So I would recommend finding things that you really enjoy doing, and then doing those during the times when you things that you enjoy doing but are still that still help you improve the person you are, and doing those when you're taking a break from working. Okay, and so these are some of the questions that I got from parents beforehand and students beforehand, but I'm also going to take a look at the chat. So right now, if you have any other questions, please let me know. I think I'm going to start the Q&A section of the presentation. So I'll just address some of the questions in the chat first. So I got a question about getting past open round in the biology Olympiad. I think the best way to prepare for USABO, in my experience, is really to just read Campbell's biology, the textbook that I presented in one of my previous slides. Campbell's biology is a very holistic but easy to understand textbook for those of you guys who are just getting started with biology, especially if you want to get into more of the competitive contests. So reading Campbell's, rereading Campbell's, doing practice contests, those are good strategies to get involved in USABO. And then I also got some questions about Science Olympiad. So mostly about preparing for Science Olympiad, and the time that it takes. And so I will not try to say that Science Olympiad doesn't take that much time, because it really does take a lot of time, especially if you are involved in a lot of different things. You may find out that Science Olympiad can be a little bit hard to manage alongside all of your other extracurricular activities because of how intense it is, and because of how in-depth you have to go with your preparation, and then how often you have to go to contests, and then just meetings and things like that. So if you feel like this is something that you're genuinely passionate about, though, I think it's probably one of the most rewarding extracurriculars that I participated in high school. It really opens a lot of doors for you. Science Olympiad is a place where you can explore the different fields of science. You can explore like biology, chemistry, physics, earth science, anything out there. There's an event for that pretty much. And you can easily switch events. And then if you don't like one, change to a different one. And it's just a good exploration competition as well. And then another thing that I've noticed when it comes to time management is Science Olympiad is often a good thing to study simultaneously with other competitions that you're doing. So for example, I also did USABO, and a lot of the material that I learned for Science Olympiad was very applicable for USABO and vice versa. So if you're also interested in doing Olympiads, Science Olympiad is a good place for you to go to as well. And then key differences between Division B and Division C. So Division B is the middle school division, Division C is the high school division. I would say the main difference is that Division C is a little bit more competitive, I would say, and the material covered is a bit more difficult. And then I got some questions about RSI and just research in general. I can quickly touch a little bit about the research that I did in high school. So most recently, I conducted a research project with RSI. And for those of you guys who don't know, RSI stands for the Research Science Institute, which is a program held by MIT, where they match participants to a mentor who works in a field of interest. And then during the course of RSI, you work on an individual research project and you write a paper, you do a presentation, and a lot of students continue that work and eventually participate in different science fairs, contests, get publications, etc. So that was probably my favorite as well research experience. And I applied to RSI I got a question about how do you apply for RSI. You do that just through CEE's portal. They usually open around October, November-ish. And then you can just write their essays. There's a resume section. There's also teacher recommendations. It's sort of like a college application. So even if you, so I would highly recommend applying to RSI just so you can get like that early college application process experience as well. And then, so I also got a question about like what I think potentially got me into RSI. Well, it's hard to tell because RSI doesn't really reveal what they're looking for among applicants, but I know one common thing that pretty much all the RSI students in my class had in common was prior research experience. So doing some sort of research in 10th grade, 9th grade, etc., is a good way to really build up your research portfolio, and that could help you explore what topics you're interested in, what topics you want to learn about at a deeper level, and get you experienced with the process of doing research. And especially if you can have some sort of publication or participate in some science fairs, I know that can definitely help your chances, boost your chances as well. And just also, I think RSI, the essays are also pretty important, really conveying what it is that excites you about science, what it is that excites you about research. And I think another thing that really helps your RSI application, at least one thing that I think really helped my RSI application, was the fact that I also did, outside of research and competitions, I also did these advocacy projects like Epidemiology Unmasked and Project Unmasked, just to show them that I was truly passionate about science in all of these different lenses outside of just doing research and competitions. And then how many APs did I take? I took a total of 19 AP classes. Yeah, and then I took 3 in my freshman year, 3 in my sophomore year, 7 in my junior year, and then I think it was 6 in my senior year. I think that was it, but yeah. And then what difference between middle school and Science Olympiad and high school Science Olympiad? I sort of already answered this, but it's more of just in the difficulty realms. High school Science Olympiad is a little bit more challenging and a little bit more competitive. How time consuming is Science Olympiad? It really depends on how serious you are about it. In high school, I was very, very serious about Science Olympiad. I would spend usually around, it depended per day, but especially near competition season, competition days, I would spend a couple of hours a day on the material and just taking tests, doing notes, learning the content. So yeah. And I think it's the more that you put into Science Olympiad, the more that you get out of it. Let's see, how many hours do I sleep during my senior year? I think honestly, I don't recommend not sleeping. I think sleeping is a good idea. Like getting plenty of sleep is more beneficial than not getting enough sleep and just grinding too much. So that would be my answer for that. Let's see. how and where did I publish my textbook? So I started when I was a sophomore. It was right during the start of COVID when I started writing Epidemiology Unmasked. I started because I felt like we were missing some key introductory resource to educate the public about epidemiology and public health. And I felt like as someone who has learned epidemiology without a very comprehensive introductory resource, I felt like that could really help many people. And so I wrote the book in a few months, and then I published it in late June. Actually did not, I self-published the textbook through a website called Lulu. This was because it would just be, it would be like self-publishing really condenses the timeline, and I really wanted to get the textbook out there as soon as possible. So that was the best option for me. And then it's also available on Amazon. So I just published it through both of those platforms. And then what age did you start doing Science Olympiad? Um, I don't think it's ever too late to start Science Olympiad. I know many of my friends in high school never did Science Olympiad in middle school. Some of them started in their junior year even, and they ended up doing very well in the contests. So it really depends on the resources that you have. So if your middle school doesn't have a Science Olympiad team, one thing you can do if you're really passionate is to start one. It is a lot of work, but you do need a sponsor as well as people who are interested to compete with you. And then I think in high school, as long as you know how much commitment it is and you really are willing to commit to that, then I think there really isn't a too late to start for Science Olympiad. And then did your extracurricular activities ever affect my GPA in school? No, I think as a student, your top priority should be to do well in school. That should be the foremost thing that you have in mind. Your extracurricular activities should be usually, from what I think, should be secondary to doing well in school, to taking hard classes, hard but manageable classes, and then doing well on your tests, doing well on your homework. And then given that you are able to perform well in your classes, that's when you should really start to dig deeper in your extracurricular activities. And then what field of science am I interested in? I right now, my foremost scientific topic interest field is biology. I'm also really interested in interdisciplinary fields. So I've done a lot of research in computational biology as well as biochemistry. And in college, I really hope to major in molecular and cellular biology in particular. And then I believe a copy of the slides will be sent out. So I also got a question about, do you need to be exposed to other biology textbooks first before Campbell? I would recommend taking like some sort of biology class in school first or simultaneously. I know at Seven Lakes, ninth grade students take pre-AP biology or just introductory biology in general. So taking that class is usually a good prerequisite to reading Campbell's intensely. So usually before you read Campbell's though, you do want to make sure you know like basic biology, things like what is a cell, just basic stuff so that you're not going in blind, because Campbell's, while it is supposedly an introductory textbook, it is very, very comprehensive, and sometimes there can be a learning curve. And then how would you recommend to balance heavy load classes with multiple competitive activities? So that's a really good question. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to include these slides on time management in my presentation. Just what I did was mostly follow those things that I listed out in those two previous slides. So really knowing what to prioritize, knowing that sometimes if I can't manage everything, then I can't do everything, and knowing like your own limits is really important. And then also just not distracting myself when I work is also a good tip to have. So when you're working, you don't want to be multitasking. You want to just focus on what you're doing, and that way you can accomplish like 2 hours of work in 1 hour, or just really condense that time. And then if my school doesn't support Science Olympiad, is it a good idea to work on Science Olympiad? Well, if your school doesn't have a Science Olympiad team, you can always create one on your own. Um, and I think it's definitely an advantage if you have a school that already has a strong Science Olympiad program. It helps you go to these competitions. It gives you funding, maybe not funding, but definitely more support to go to these competitions. But I think if you're really interested and if you really want to compete in Science Olympiad, it's that would totally be like your choice. And I think you could definitely make it work. And then I got a question about the difference between Science Olympiad and USABO. So the difference between Science Olympiad and USABO, there's quite a few differences actually. Science Olympiad is an event-based competition. So there are different events that are based on different fields of science. And there's actually 23 something like that events. Each one is a different science topic, whereas USABO encompasses the entire field of biology. So it encompasses things like plant biology, molecular biology, human anatomy and physiology. So it's like every single biology field you can think of is covered in USABO, whereas Scioli is very focused. So some of the biology events in Scioli are like anatomy and physiology, disease detectives, etc. So Science Olympiad, the events are more specific. That's sort of the main difference. So I got some questions about research as well. For research, I started relatively early, started in my freshman year. And I think for those of you who are just starting to research, do sort of delve into the field of research, I would recommend trying to see if there are any programs that you can apply to in your local area. I know local universities often have high school research programs that do the work of matching you with a mentor, so you don't have to do like outreach on your own. But if you can't find those, there are definitely ways that you can get in touch with a mentor. Cold emailing is one way. Another way is to try to find someone who you may know, or someone who you have friends who may know, a teacher who may know, just getting in touch somehow by taking advantage of your network. And cold emailing, I know they're often can seem intimidating, but if you're persistent enough, usually it can work out for you. And then did I focus on just one research area or explore different areas in different years? What's the outcome of your research projects? So yeah, I actually explored quite a few topics in research. I did one project on cardiology, one on epidemiology, one on public health. Well, the public health one was more of like a smaller project. And then my most recent one was one on neurodegenerative diseases. So I think it can be helpful to explore different fields of science or different fields within one bigger field when you're doing research, just so you know what it is that you're interested in. And the outcomes of my research projects, I was able to get a few publications in journals and at an international conference, as well as recently I participated in a science fair and presented my research at a conference. Let's see, what did I do a sport? I did not do a sport in high school, but I think it's definitely manageable to do a sport alongside other extracurricular activities. And I think more about the time commitment, it's just really focusing on what it is that you want to accomplish, setting reasonable, but also like challenging goals for yourself. I got a question about, does the Science Olympiad coach at my high school help students get Science Olympiad national championships? Well, at my school, or just Science Olympiad in general, how you do in the competition really depends on how much work you put in. So the coach is more of there just to help you organize, at least for Seven Lakes. Our coach is there just to help us organize the contests, organize logistics, bring us to different competitions, support us if we need additional assistance with resources, etc. The studying is all done by the students themselves. So a student who does well in a competition, they did that all, they definitely put in a lot of work to do that, practiced a lot with their partners, etc. So it definitely is mostly dependent on the students themselves. And then I got a question about, do I have some college professors to guide my research, or do I do it completely on my own? Um, well, my research projects have had a mentor. I think it's helpful to have some mentor to help you in your project, just because they're someone that you can go to for any questions. You can go to them for guidance on how to like structure your research, what direction to take it, because a lot of the times, especially if you're just starting, you may feel overwhelmed at how intense research is. So getting in touch with someone, it doesn't necessarily even need to be a college professor. It could be like a PhD student or someone who just has a high level of experience in the field could serve as a mentor. So I would highly recommend having a mentor. However, it's definitely not a requirement. I know a lot of science fairs don't require mentors, but I would recommend one if you can get one. And then can you provide some resources to help students start? I think going on the websites of your local universities or just people that you may know of, and searching their research interests, what they do in their labs, that could be a good start just to help you see who it is, whether this person that you're looking into aligns with your research interests, and then just reaching out. That would probably be my best advice. I got a question about which edition of Campbell's Biology. Not really. I believe as long as it's above the 7th edition, it should be like, they should all be like pretty good and pretty decent in quality. Can you please compare Science Olympiad with Science Bowl? I never actually competed in Science Bowl, but from what I can tell, Science Bowl is definitely more of like a buzzer-based competition. So yeah. Any tips on cold emailing? Yes, I can offer some tips on cold emailing, but probably my biggest tip is to be very concise in your email. Don't ramble too much or make your email super long, because professors, as you probably all know, are very busy people. So if you do send an email that's way too long, it's not going to be, it's going to be kind of off-putting. So making sure that you have everything very written in a very concise format, that you don't include any unnecessary information, and you don't want to ramble too much about your credentials in your cold email either. Just expressing genuine passion for what the work it is that they're doing, and then also just being very direct in what you want, and not sort of being wishy-washy. So yeah, just directness, conciseness, and passion would probably be my biggest tips. And I got a question just about general motivation. I think motivation really comes from within. It comes from being passionate about a topic, and really finding something that makes you happy to do, and you don't think of it as a burden. So I remember from when I was studying Science Olympiad, I really felt like this was something that I could do like for a long time. I could spend hours on it without feeling tired. And so you just want to find things that truly make you happy and you look forward to doing every day. And I think that's probably the best way to keep yourself motivated, especially when times get stressful. Not to like see this thing as just another extra thing that you need to pile on to all the things that you do. And then, have you taken summer classes in your 9th, 10th, and 11th summer? Yes, I can definitely go into my summer details. I did take classes every single year of high school. Sometimes I took them simultaneously with other activities. Sometimes I took them like not simultaneously. So in the summer leading into my freshman year, I attended the Honor Summer Math Camp, HSMC, as a first year student. And then the summer leading into my 10th grade year, I attended HSMC for a second summer. That's where I also worked on some research. And then the summer before my junior year, that was the COVID year. So the COVID year, I was originally going to do HSMC for a third year, but I felt like I wanted to work on some more independent projects that were more social impact geared. So I wrote my textbook that summer, and then I also launched Kid Teach Kid, which is a nonprofit, that summer. But yeah, and then I also started Project Unmasked that summer. So yeah, that was a pretty productive summer for me. And the summer before my senior year, which was the one that is most recent, I did RSI. And then before RSI, I also took, yeah, that was, RSI was my main commitment that summer. I also did some like miscellaneous fellowships, internships, etc. throughout the summers, but those were like my main things that I did. And then as for classes, I did take summer classes the summer before my ninth grade. Oh, I didn't take it the summer before ninth grade, but the summer before 10th grade, I took, I think I took world geography or something like that. And then the summer before my 11th grade year, I took AP US history. The summer before my senior year, I took AP government. Okay, let's see. Is it too late to join Scioli in 10th grade? I don't think so. I think as long as you're open to learning different events, taking on different events, working really hard, and know how much commitment it requires, and you're genuinely passionate about those topics, then it's not too late to join. And then a typical day in my high school, well, it really depends on what year it was. So a day in my freshman year would be very different from, let's say, a day in my junior year. But basically, I always tried to do my homework as soon as I got out of school. So I tried to finish my homework like right after. So I try not to like procrastinate my homework, basically is what I'm saying, because as soon as I get my homework done, that's when I can really work on the things that that really interest me. So like studying for Science Olympiad, or working on a research project, or working on a project unmasked, or just spending more time with my family, my friends. So yeah, I would say just some variation of that on certain days. That would be like how I spent my time. Do I have hospital volunteer experience? Yes, I did volunteer at a hospital based in Houston for 2 years in my freshman and sophomore years before COVID sort of put a stop to that. But yeah, I think it was a pretty fun experience. And then, do I have any mentors outside of school to help you do research? So all of my research mentors are like professors or PhD students or people who don't go to my school. They definitely are people who are very like experienced and accomplished in their fields. So hopefully that answers your question. Can you tutor in the summer? Uh, I think you can do whatever you want during the summer as long as it's productive for you and you feel like it's a good use of your time. So I do know a lot of people who do tutor in the summer, so that's definitely an option. How often I'm assuming you're asking how often I meet with my professors. It really depends. I know sometimes if I'm doing research over the summer, I will meet with them much more often than if it's over the school year. But generally, my advice would be to keep in touch with your mentor and maintain some sort of active communication, just so that you can go to them for any help that you have and go to them for any roadblocks, go to them for any advice. And it's not, and you don't have to like pause your research if you don't hear back from them. What comp sci programming do you need for your research, and when did you start to learn coding? Thanks. So I think having at least somewhat of a computer science background is really, really helpful for research, especially nowadays. Once you become good at coding, or at least once you know how to code, it opens a lot of doors for you. And I really didn't start coding until later on. I took AP Computer Science A in my freshman year, but then after that, I started learning some additional languages on my own. So I sort of learned R, and as well as just other basic things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, things like that. So learning how to code, I think it can help you a lot with your research projects. And for my research, a lot of it was R based because I did bioinformatics research. And I would say as long as you have a basic understanding of how to code and you're open and willing to learn things as you go, that's pretty much the scope of what you need for research. Have I ever done a summer boarding university class? No, I have not. I think there are programs like that out there, but I just haven't done one. And then someone asked, what is I'm assuming you're asking HSMC. So HSMC stands for the Honors Summer Math Camp. It is a math camp run by Texas State University, MathWorks. And it's basically a multi-year summer program where the first year you go, you take classes in number theory and a coding language called Mathematica, and you learn how to write proofs. So it's like a pure math-based camp in the first summer. And then the second summer and beyond, you learn different topics. So the second summer, you learn things like combinatorics and analysis. And third year, you learn more analysis and abstract algebra. And then in the second and third years, you can also do research with one of the Texas State University professors. How did I make the schools use my textbook? Okay, so this is a good question, but what I did was mostly just do my own outreach. Sometimes, like, especially when you're beginning, you really have to take initiative to promote your project and make it expand. So when I first started was I reached out just to people that I knew. So like the teachers at my high school, different schools that I felt like could benefit from using my textbook. I just reached out, I called, gave them a call, sent them an email, that sort of thing. And then pretty much all of them were very open to the idea because they were all lacking this sort of resource in their curricula. And then at a certain point, you will get to the point where your impact is pretty broad and people may start reaching out to you. So yeah. And then where do you register for summer classes? I took every single summer class with my school. So I know KDISD at least allows you to register just from their website. You may want to check with your specific district just to see, but it should be like online. And then I just got a question about foreign languages. So in high school, I took Chinese. I took 4 years of Chinese, but well, I technically took 3 because I skipped Chinese 1. So I took 3 years, but I did get 4 years of language credits. And then can I recommend some resources for studying Science Olympiad? Yes, I can definitely go back to that page where I had the textbooks. So yes, this would probably be the page to look at for books for Science Olympiad. Did you take any community college courses? If so, what were they? I did not take any community college courses, but if you feel like there's a course that your local community college offers and it's not too much difficulty to register, then I would recommend you do it. How many hours did you volunteer in the hospital per week? So this was an activity that I did very early on in high school. I did it in freshman year and early sophomore year. And I did about 8 hours a month. So that was about the extent of it, if I remember correctly. How did you develop your writing skills for your book and what would you recommend for middle schoolers? So my book is a bit unique in the fact that it's not super technical. The language used isn't too complicated. It wasn't like one that required way too much knowledge of epidemiology to read it. And so I used a pretty conversational tone in my book. So I just sort of structured it as sort of if you and I were having a conversation because I really wanted it to make it accessible to the general public, to like middle schoolers, even younger students potentially. So yeah. And then what would you recommend for middle school students? So for middle school students, it's pretty much the same advice that I'd give to high school students, right? It's just managing your time well, begin exploring things that you're interested in and just working hard to do whatever and setting goals that are reasonable, but still challenge you. Okay, how much time did you put in math contests aside from Science Olympiad? So math was something that I did sort of early on in high school. I did math mostly in middle school and then I sort of carried it on in high school. But in high school, I sort of transitioned more towards like computational biology, more towards science. But I remember in math contests, I would just take like practice tests, like AMC 10 practice tests. Sometimes, especially near contest season, near the AMCs, I would do like about an hour, potentially more. every few days just to take like a practice test and then go over it and then do like corrections and just go through that normal math contest prep like cycle. And then could you please talk more about the Coca-Cola scholarship? Yes, of course. So the Coca-Cola scholarship is one of the most like well-known scholarships in the country. And it is also probably one of the most prestigious ones as well. It's basically one that gives a $20,000 scholarship to one of 150 students nationwide. And usually around like 70,000 students apply. And the Coca-Cola scholarship is unique in that you can defer it for like up to 10 years, or you can use it anytime within 10 years. And so what the Coca-Cola scholarship recipients usually have is like some sort of major community service or some sort of major social advocacy work. And they that's like definitely one of their core criteria. Do I have any experience? Oh, wait, let me see. Oh, okay, I just see. Choosing Chinese as a second language is it a disadvantage for college applications? I'm not sure if I know the answer to that because I don't really like know the inside scoop on the college application, like the how admissions officers choose their candidates for admission, but I don't think it was that big of a deal for me personally. I didn't think it would be something to make or break my application. So what project did I do in RSI? In RSI, I worked on a project related to Alzheimer's disease. I worked in a lab affiliated with Harvard Medical School where I analyzed data on a potential Alzheimer's disease drug to find like the targets that it would have for Alzheimer's disease. So I got a question about, would you say that all these things that you did were for college or were they for your own desires and passions? Definitely the latter. I think if you were to do something solely to stand out on your college applications, you wouldn't be able to do it well because it doesn't come from a place of genuine interest or passion. In order to stay motivated, I think you really need that internal desire to want to really love it, and just doing it solely for college apps really doesn't satisfy that. Did you hire outside counselors throughout my high school or for college applications? No, I did not. Did I apply to other colleges? Yes, I applied to a total of 9 colleges, and I was accepted to all of the 9 colleges. How do I balance life and study? What are the other things that I like to do to just relax? That's a great question. So I think I just I gave like a list of some of the tips that I had in these like later on slides about time management. But yes, that does bring up a good point. I think high school is so much more than just working and grinding and just doing all this productive stuff, but I think it's also really important to have fun. I know a lot of the times it may seem like a rough to balance life and study, but I think finding something that makes you really happy, that allows you to relax. So something, like I said, productive breaks. So yeah, I think for me though, if I would do something, go back to high school and change something, I would probably want to spend some more time on things that like hobbies or interests that I never really had the time to pursue. Okay. Any advice on college essay writing? Did you write a lot in the summer before my senior year? So I think for college essays, you really just want to write from the heart. You don't want to make it sound fake or overly flowery or just not you. You really want to make it reflect your own voice, and you want it to come from a place of genuine passion. So did I write a lot in the summer before my senior year? I think my experience with college essay writing may be different from a lot of others because I know I started relatively late. Actually, I started like in late August. That was because for most of the summer before my senior year, I was pretty busy with RSI. So I sort of put that on the back burner. But I would recommend starting early. That would be one of my top pieces of advice for college essays. Starting early gives you the opportunity to run through some drafts that you won't use at all, and it'll help you narrow down what you want to write about and just hone your essay for the better and give you more time to do that. Science Olympiad has more than just biology, chemistry, and physics. Yes, that is correct. Can we study others besides those big three subjects? Yes, you can. You can enroll in whatever event that you like, as well as long as it suits like your school schedule. And then are other subjects harder to prepare? And how about textbooks for them? So I mostly focused on biology events in Science Olympiad, so I don't think I can provide as much guidance for things that are not biology events, but I would say just searching for textbooks online on whatever topic that you're doing can definitely just give you good options. Or not even textbooks, you can search for like videos, you can search for informational websites, you can even search for college curricula. And let's see. So did I have a goal for college at my freshman year? No, I really only started thinking about college like near the end of my junior year. Yeah. Did I have any fine arts related activities such as band, orchestra, and theater? If yes, did you put them down for your priority list? So I did orchestra in middle school and in early high school, but I did not do them later on in high school. When and how did I find out that I was passionate about biology? And so I think this one really just follows from exploring different fields in Science Olympiad. So when I was started off in middle school Science Olympiad, 7th grade, I tried out some different events. I tried out like physics events, tried out different like chemistry events and things like that. But I felt like the biology events were just the ones that were the most interesting to me. And then once I discovered that, I started exploring more biology events, and then I started doing more research on biology and just learning more topics in biology. And that's pretty much how I discovered that. And I think that sort of goes back to my point about Science Olympiad being a really good starting place for you, especially if you are new to science. It really helps you explore different things that you're interested in. And then someone just asked me to clarify a productive break. This is sort of definitely a term that I came up with myself. I just think it's something that I usually define it as something that like it is a break activity that you can do that makes you happy, but it still improves yourself. So maybe it could be like spending time with your family, or maybe like doing a hobby that you're interested in, exploring a new interest. I think it's just something that like gives you more insight into life, but is also a break for you. And then applying for the Coca-Cola scholarship. So the Coke scholarship has a very intensive application process. So there's a first step, which is you just fill in your basic resume stuff, and then they go from around 70,000 applicants to around 1,000 applicants. So the first step is like it's the most difficult to get across. And then afterwards, it's a more intensive application. It involves essays, more detailed descriptions of your resume, and then they go from 1,000-ish, 1,600-ish to 250. And then finally, from everyone in the 250 gets an interview. And then all of those students who get an interview, they choose 150 to get the scholarship. And then I got a question about why Harvard. So Harvard has a notoriously strong pre-med resource base. So that I knew that was what I wanted to do. And also Harvard is really good in like the government department. It's good in the humanities department as well. And so I knew that was also something that I wanted to pursue. So it was really strong in the things that I wanted to do. And then did I ever feel stressed out? I think every high school student has felt at least somewhat of stressed out at some point. And then dealing with stress though, I think one piece of advice that I would have is to give yourself a break if you need it. You don't have to be productive all of the time. And really just knowing your limits and knowing what makes you happy is a good way to deal with stress. And how to prepare for Science Olympiad entrance exam. So it differs from school to school. I know at Beckendorf, which is the middle school that I went to, it wasn't really that much of it was a very holistic exam. So not many people really prepared intensely for it. But my advice for you would be to just go on the scioli.org website and then take a look at the events and the descriptions and then just doing like some basic research on those events. Okay, let's see.
Just real quick, it's 20 minutes past 8 o'clock. So with respect to everybody's time, maybe Stephanie, you can take one or two more questions.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess the last question I'll answer is what kind of community service achievements do I think allowed me to get the Coca-Cola scholarship? I think in my interview, the thing that we discussed the most was Project Unmasked and Epidemiology Unmasked. So my public health advocacy work was probably the thing that differentiated me from the other candidates. This was, I think, a very unique thing that maybe they haven't heard that much about. And the fact that I was able to reach a wide scope of people with my advocacy work was probably the main thing for that.
I think we are 21 minutes past 8 o'clock. So Stephanie, thank you so much. I think this is very insightful. Previously, I think I was not aware of a lot of the details about Science Olympia and maybe some of the other stuff you discussed, especially how you balance some of these priorities and how you do the time management, especially you talk about it quite a few times about the productive breaks, which is kind of an innovative term for me as well. I'm pretty sure all of us have learned quite a bit from this talk. Thank you so much for giving the presentation, and everybody else, thank you for attending.